Hey guys, what's up? This is B coming to you from G&A today. So what I'm going to show you how to do today is how to take the bolt completely apart. So we're going to take the bolt out, we're going to take the bolt carrier apart, and then even take the bolt apart to the point where you're taking the firing pin out. And so I'm going to show you through the steps how to do that. So there are several tools you're going to need today. Okay, there are going to be several of these bits that you need. You're going to need two hex heads. You're going to need a 2.5 millimeter and a 3 millimeter. And these, they're for the first two that we're going to take out. And the 2.5 and 3 are still a tiny bit too small. But I tried my standard bits, and the standard bits are too big or too small. These metric ones fit the best, but they're still not perfect. So I don't know what's going on with that. The 2.5 is just a tiny bit small, and the 3 obviously is a tiny bit too small. They don't fit perfectly, but that's as close as I could get. So you need a 2.5 millimeter and a 3 millimeter hex head. Now once we get down to the bolt, you're going to need 3 star heads, okay, or Torx heads. You're going to need a T10, a T8, and a T6. Okay, you're going to need a T8, a T10, T8, and T6, and I'll show you where we'll need all of those. You're going to need a small little punch. There's a little pin that retains the firing pin. There's a pin that goes across the whole firing pin that keeps it from going too far forward or too far back. So you need a pretty small little punch. And then you also probably need a flathead, pretty good size flathead, to be able to kind of work the two halves of the bolt carrier part. Alright, so obviously you want to check to make sure your rifle's unloaded. Nothing's in the chamber, magazine's out, inspect, you don't have any rounds anywhere. Okay. Now on my rifle, I've replaced these pins right here with the H&K Push Pins, and I'll leave a link in the description to these. This makes it a lot easier where I can just pull that pin out. Otherwise, there's 2 flatheads, and you have to put a flathead on this side and take another flathead screwdriver on this side to unscrew the screw, and then push out the bolt. I've got these, which makes it a lot easier. So the way I do this is I take that one out first. Now we need to take out these 2 screws right here, and this is where you need that 2.5 millimeter hex head. So there's one of them. Mine already has blue Loctite on it from the factory. And then same thing on the other side. Okay, we've got these 2 out now. And the next thing is taking this bolt out right here, and this is what's holding this whole butt plate onto the upper receiver. So this is where you need that 3 millimeter, and again the 3 millimeter is just a little bit too small. I tried a 1/8, it doesn't fit. It's just a tiny bit too big. So really, if there's a 3.1 millimeter, I don't know, but for all the standard sizes there are, 3 millimeter is the closest I could find. If you happen to have a GSG5 or 522, the Allen head hex head that comes with that for that rifle works in here, but I'm just using this 3 millimeter. And once you do this on mine's the newest generation. It's got a huge spring back behind here, so you're going to need to make sure and hold this thing pretty tightly, because it's going to want to push that up pretty hard. All right, and once you take that bolt off, there's a little lock washer with that also, so make sure you hang on to that. Okay, and also want to mention probably my friend Reg Sparks. Think that's his name. I don't know how to say it, but he's mentioned that he's worked in tools for a long time. He'll probably be able to help me with exactly what tool or what size probably could fit that the best. But mine's the newest generation, and this spring comes off. All right, now I'm going to push this pin out of the front here, and then my lower receiver just pulls straight off of there. From here, my bolt comes free, and if yours is the older generation, I forget how that's different, but there's going to be a couple extra things I think you have to do to get your bolt all the way out. But from there, my bolt is free. And let's take this thing apart. Now, I think the bolt, as far as I can tell from the older generation, is going to be very similar. There may be some minor differences, but as I was reading descriptions on the bolt part, people were talking about having the first generation bolt, and I think we're going to be very, very similar here. So you can see right here, this is the side with the serial number. This is where you're going to need your T8, and there's 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to take those 5 out, T8. Alright, so there's those 5. That's what holds the bolt carrier, the 2 halves together, is those 5. Okay, from here now, the 2 halves are ready to come apart. And this is what took me a little while, but there's nothing really holding these 2 together except these 2 rods in here that have the spring around them. They're kind of holding together, but not really. But what you can do here is go ahead and start to bring this apart. And so what I do is just take a flathead and just carefully do this. Just carefully wedge it in there and just pop it just a little bit. And that should bring those 2 halves apart. Of course, when you do that, you're going to bring the spring off. And then from here, this will slide, just kind of pull back and out, and it'll pull out. These 2 springs, as far as I can tell, are exactly the same. But if you'll notice, and I didn't notice this at first, had to put it back together and realize that something was wrong to notice, but this spring is actually tapered. Okay, and so the smaller end is what rests up against here, and the wider end is what's going to rest up against that part up there in that groove. And we'll talk more about that as we put it back together. Okay, so we have the 2 halves and these 2 springs. We're going to set those to the side. Now from here to take the actual bolt apart, there's this bolt jacket, this black part, and the serial number is a piece that actually sticks out. That's a part of this piece. It's all one piece. So what's going to have to happen is the firing pin has to come out to be able to allow this thing to slide to this side, because it keys onto that part right there. Okay, so there's several things going on in here. First of all, there's a pin, just a little pin that's going across this way, that's going perpendicular to the firing pin. And there's a hole in this firing pin. The firing pin is like a flat blade, and that pin goes through that hole this way in the firing pin, and it keeps it from going too far back or too far forward. So that pin's going to have to come out, and that's where the punch comes in. We'll show you that in just a second. Here is this firing pin safety out of battery plunger, firing pin plunger, whatever. I saw all kinds of names for that. So that's another thing. And when we take this apart, you need to be careful, because that thing will spring, and the spring that's pushing this thing this way is kind of a darker colored, or mine is anyways. And I've lost that thing about 3 times down here. So be careful of that. Then also, of course, there's the firing pin return spring that's pushing the firing pin back. And there's a little like a little plunger in that spring also. So there's all kinds of things. There's a spring pushing this way, there's a spring pushing this way, and we're going to be pushing this cross pin out this way. So you got to be careful as we take all this apart. So first of all, we're going to take these 3 out of this bolt jacket, and this is where you need the T10. So there are those 3 screws that hold on the bolt jacket. Again, these are the T10. Now, that pin that goes across the firing pin here to hold it from going too far back is held in place by a set screw right here. And this is where you're going to need the T6. So I'm going to take this T6, and there's a little tiny set screw right here. Okay? And so there's the little set screw that comes out of there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the punch, and this little tiny pinhole right here is where I'm going to have to push that pin out. Now, as I'm about to push that out, hold this firing pin with your finger right here. And this is kind of a trick to do all of this, especially to do it on camera. But I'm just putting that pin in there, and I'm going to push this little pin out there. And it's not like a roll pin where you have to put any pressure. It's being held by that set screw, so it just pushes out pretty easily. But there's that pin that goes perpendicular to the firing pin to hold it in place. Okay, now when we take this apart, this plunger right here is going to want to shoot up, and the firing pin is going to want to shoot back. So put your thumb over this and hold this plunger right here as you bring the firing pin out. Okay, as you bring that out, everything's just going to start to fall apart, and then you can see the spring pushing that up. So there's that firing pin safety, out of battery plunger, whatever ISSC calls it, and there's that little spring. So make sure you put those somewhere, hang on to those. And then from there, now this can just slide off. And be careful as this falls out. Here's your firing pin return spring. And there's the little plunger that fits inside of it. It fits kind of tightly, so it's not like it comes out real loose, but be careful that you don't lose that piece. So then there you go, there's the firing pin. And I'm not going to show you how to take the extractor off of there. Looks like, yeah, I'm not even going to try that. But that should get you down far enough to what you really need to do here. Okay, so now to put it back together. So what we're going to do is you're going to take this spring with the plunger, your firing pin return spring with the plunger, and push it to where it rides up that way in this groove right here. Now, so what you want to do is hold it. You're going to be holding this upside down so that this stays in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it like that. I'm going to key the bottom part of the bolt here onto the bolt jacket, making sure that's still in its groove. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the spring, drop it in, take this plunger, drop it on top of that spring. Okay, and this is going to be a trick to do on camera here, makes it even harder. But as I'm holding the bolt jacket, like compressing the bolt jacket to the bottom part of the bolt, as I push that in, I'm going to take the firing pin, and it's going to fit in there like this. Okay, and on mine, I don't know if this is for the newer generation, but there's a kind of a moon shape on the bottom side of this firing pin where it allows it to catch on this out of battery plunger, and that catches it for me. Now what I'm going to do is, while I'm still holding all this together, is I'm going to take that little pin, I'm going to drop it back in there, and you may have to push the firing pin forward just a little bit, and it dropped down in place there. I'm going to take this set screw, I'm going to put it back in. Alright, now I'm going to put those screws with the T10, put that back on the jacket there, and I'm going to push this plunger in, make sure that my firing pin can still move forward. It's moving for me, and we're going to put those back in. Alright, just check function. That's able to plunge in. As that's plunged in, a firing pin. Sometimes if I don't know, if I tighten these too much, my firing pin won't hardly move. So that's got that all back together. Now, to put the actual bolt back into the bolt carrier, again, these big springs right here are tapered, and I'm going to put the smaller one down close to the bolt here. If you don't, you won't be able to charge the rifle. It'll bind it up, where when you try to charge it, it'll only come about halfway back. So the wider are back here. Now I'm going to take this side right here, okay, and this one goes in pretty easy. Making sure that that spring's in place there. Now this side takes a little bit more effort because I've got to get that spring up into this groove here to hold in place. And as you do that, you have to kind of wiggle it around to be able to get this piece right here to go around the back side of the bolt face there. There you go. That took forever. Sometimes it's just, I don't know why, sometimes it's difficult for that to happen, but you just got to get that spring up in the groove up in there and get it to where you can get it to bring those two halves together. And from here, obviously, we're just going to put in our 5 screws here on this side. Put in our 5 screws here with that T8. And that's got the bolt all the way back together. All right, then from there, it's just putting it back together. Everything looks good. So there you go. That's how you disassemble the bolt on an ISSC MK22. I'm eventually going to show how to break down the trigger mechanism on this. Just trying to weed out problems here, trying to get this rifle firing properly. But that's how you disassemble the bolt on ISSC MK22. Thanks for watching today.